How weak is Goku Jr. exactly? Well, you'd be shocked to find out that even though he can turn Super Saiyan at an extremely young age, something that Goku couldn't do at that age, and something that Pan was never shown doing at all, he's actually a lot weaker than you could probably imagine. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to point out how much Saiyan genetics Goku Jr. actually has. And Goku Jr. is 1/64th Saiyan, and I already did a video explaining this before, but we're not going to go too much into that. The point that we're trying to get at here is that with 1/64th Saiyan DNA, if we use a basic calculator and just divide 1 by 64, that would mean that Goku Jr. is approximately 1.6% Saiyan when you round up the numbers, which is pretty low when you consider the fact that he's almost completely purely human at this point. And despite all of that, he could do something that his great-great-grandmother, who's 1/4 Saiyan, couldn't do in terms of turning Super Saiyan. But turning Super Saiyan doesn't necessarily make Goku Jr. a strong character by more modern Dragon Ball means. And the first thing that we will do to illustrate this is say that in his base form at the beginning of GT's A Hero's Legacy, Goku Jr. couldn't even do basic exercises that an extremely old Pan could do. And to be specific when it comes to the actual age, Pan was approximately 110 in A Hero's Legacy, and the way that we calculated this is that in the Japanese dub of Dragon Ball GT, there was a 5-year time skip after the end of Dragon Ball Z, but the reason why Dragon Ball fans make the mistake that Pan was 14 and why Bra was 13 is because of the fact that you're using the Funimation dub, which made it a 10-year skip, which would have made Bra 13 and which would have made Pan 14. And then there was a 1-year time skip in GT where they were reviving Earth with the Dragon Balls by using the Namekian Dragon Balls, and in that 1-year time skip, Pan would have aged about a year, which would have meant that she would have been 10 near the later arcs of GT, and then when you stack the 100-year time skip on top of that, you're talking about an extremely old Pan that's significantly past your prime, even if you say Saiyans, or people with Saiyan DNA, stay in their physical prime later on. This is an extremely old Pan that could do exercises that a young Goku Jr. was not capable of doing and was struggling to do. Now let me tell you guys that I'm not a fan of power levels by any stretch, because when you try to attach numbers to things, it just gets convoluted. But what we have to do is we will scale Goku Jr. 50 times to basically have him fighting against the monsters that we saw in A Hero's Legacy. Now what we have to understand is that we can never figure out the exact power level of these monsters that Goku Jr. was fighting, but one thing that we can say with absolute certainty is that Kid Goku at the beginning of Dragon Ball would have been able to fight against villains like this, because we've seen him do that when it comes to fighting against people like Yamcha, or fighting against, Pilaf and his machines, or fighting against the Red Ribbon Army. And then throughout the entirety of Dragon Ball, where Goku was mostly a kid, Goku's fought against villains like this and stronger. So by all stretches of imagination, we could basically say that Kid Goku in his base form was pretty much almost always stronger than what Goku Jr. ever was in his base, and Goku Jr. would require a Super Saiyan transformation to even be comparable to Goku at certain points, because Goku could fight villains like this just in his base form. Which only goes to show you, could you imagine if Goku was able to turn into a Super Saiyan at a younger age? Obviously, this was introduced into Dragon Ball before the whole concept of Super Saiyan existed, because Goku wasn't even known as an alien at this point in the series. He was just a mysterious kid with a tail. But the point that we're trying to get at is that if Goku was to have Super Saiyan early in Dragon Ball, he would completely, destroy all of these villains to the point where it wouldn't even be competitive, because he was able to beat them without it anyways. So with all of that said, we can say with certainty that Goku Jr. would be about a 50th the strength of Kid Goku prior to training with Master Roshi as a low estimate. So on the low end, we can say that he's about a 50th the strength of Goku with just Grandpa Gohan's training before even meeting Master Roshi and learning how to do the Kamehameha and learning, basic ki control and all of those things. And this obviously would say that Goku Jr. is even significantly weaker than Krillin too, which is actually kind of crazy when you consider the fact that Krillin's a pure human. Goku Jr. at least has some Saiyan genetics, and it's still not even enough to put him above a character like Krillin at this point in very, very early Dragon Ball. Now, if we were to give a higher estimate, we could probably say that in A Hero's Legacy, Goku Jr. would have been approximately the strength of Kid Goku after Master Roshi's training is like a high estimate if you say that maybe the Super Saiyan boost was a lot bigger than we expected, so Goku post-Roshi training would have been around the strength of what Goku Jr. would have been with Super Saiyan. Now, what we also have to point out here too, guys, is that Goku Jr. did get stronger later on when he was obviously fighting against Vegeta Jr. in episode 64, the last episode of Dragon Ball GT, but it's hard to scale exactly how strong he would have gotten in this Vegeta Jr. fight. Now, during the fight, he was clearly stronger because he was able to fly, and he was able to turn into a Super Saiyan at will. So as a result of this, if we just scale Vegeta Jr. to Goku Jr. and say that they're around the same, but considering the fact that not much time had passed and it really seemed like Goku Jr. was really learning more basic ki control and how to fly and do all of those things, we can probably say that by the time of this tournament, Goku Jr. was probably as strong as Kid Goku in the 21st tournament as a Super Saiyan, and if we want to really give a higher estimate, he might be as strong as what Kid Goku would have been in the 22nd tournament when he fought against a character like Tien. But obviously this is including Goku Jr. using Super Saiyan, so clearly we're not talking about him in his base, because if we're talking about him in his base, I mean this would be a complete like wash, because obviously Goku's at a handicap not being able to transform, but clearly he's nowhere near as strong as what Goku would have been after the training plus the sacred holy water that he consumed before fighting against King Piccolo, and obviously King Piccolo would have been way stronger, and we're not even going to consider how Goku Jr. would compare to Goku near the end of Dragon Ball where he fought against Piccolo Jr. But what we will say though is that if they were to theoretically fight, obviously Goku Jr. would have an advantage because he can fly completely, and Goku really didn't learn that ability until he fought against Piccolo Jr., and even in the Piccolo Jr. fight, he really only flew near the end of the fight. So as a result of all of that, Goku Jr. may have had an edge because of ki control and flying, but that's basically about it in terms of raw power. And even if we were to try and compare like Vegeta Jr. to his ancestor, I guess you could say, in Vegeta, and what Vegeta was able to do as a kid where he was easily destroying Cybermen, I mean, it's not even close there too, where like Vegeta's way above what Vegeta Jr. was, even as a Super Saiyan. So it's kind of crazy to believe that Kid Goku and Kid Vegeta in their base forms are significantly stronger than their descendants would be many years later with a Super Saiyan ability that they weren't even capable of doing at that age. But it just goes to show that when Saiyan genetics get diluted, it just weakens the characters overall to the point where Goku Jr. is even weaker than a lot of the human characters in Dragon Ball.